Hello, good evening, and today we are going to talk about how blood circulates through the human body. Okay, so learning outcomes. Describe the structure and function of the heart in terms of muscular contraction and the working of valves. Outline the cardiac cycle in terms of what happens during systole and diastole. Identify the main blood vessels to and from the heart, lungs, liver, and kidney. So the heart supplies the body and its organs with blood. With each beat, the heart pumps blood through the blood vessels. When you exercise, blah blah blah, your heart beats faster. When you relax, you feel your heartbeat slowing down. So what is going on? So in humans and other mammals, the blood passes through the heart twice in one complete circuit. Blood flows from one part of the body to the heart, and then from the heart it flows to the lungs and back to the heart again before it's pumped back to the rest of the body. Okay, so let's take a look here. So we see that the blood flows from around the body, which means the cells in the body, and it goes through the veins and back to the first chamber of the heart over here. So this vein is given a special name. It's called the vena cava, and this is connected to the right aorta. From the right aorta, it then goes down to this thing known as the right ventricle, which then moves through the pulmonary artery towards the lungs. And this artery is a special artery because it contains deoxygenated blood. Now the word pulmonary, it simply means having to do with the lungs. So when we say pulmonary artery or pulmonary veins, we mean the artery or the vein that is associated to the lungs. Okay, once the blood flows through the lungs, the oxygen will diffuse in from the alveoli into the bloodstream, and the carbon dioxide will diffuse out of the bloodstream into the alveoli. And so the blood that comes back through the pulmonary vein is oxygenated blood. It then goes towards this place known as the left atrium, and then down into this called the left ventricle, and then out and above through this thing called the aorta, and then eventually the arteries. Okay, the arteries, they carry blood away from the heart towards the rest of the body, and most arteries carry oxygenated blood except for the pulmonary artery, which is over here. Okay, so do you want to see a picture of a beating heart, a real one? Okay, if you don't want, just close your eyes. If not, let's take a look at this. So this is how a heart beats. This is a heart that is beating outside of the human body, and it's a real heart. Okay, this one is done kept alive by a machine. So as you can see, the heart is beating quite rapidly. It's very bloody. Right, there's some leakage here and there. This happens during a heart transplant. So for example, there's someone trying to donate a heart. They have to keep the heart fresh before they transfer it into the donee. All these graphs are monitoring the heart rate. Okay, so let's look at the structure of the heart. Now, first things first, we need to remember that when we're looking at a picture of a heart, it is a mirror image. Alright, so this side of the heart will be the left side. Okay, because mirror image must flip. And then this side of the heart is the right side. Okay, so just be careful, because even after many years, I still make this mistake of the left and right, not mirror imaging my left and right properly. Okay, so let's recap what we just learned. We learned that the veins carry the blood from the rest of the body parts back towards the heart. Eventually, it all accumulates into this thing known as the vena cava. There are actually two vena cava. One is called the superior, one is called the inferior one. Doesn't matter, we just call it as vena cava. Right? And then this would then go into the very first chamber of the heart, which is called the right atria. Okay, so other than that, I'll talk more about the chambers. Just give me a moment to talk about these different blood vessels here. So besides the vena cava, there is also this thing known as the pulmonary arteries. So this pulmonary artery is the artery that carries the deoxygenated blood towards the lungs. And now remember, the word artery does not mean to say that it's carrying oxygenated or deoxygenated blood. Right? Rather, the word artery is about whether it's carrying blood away from the heart. So arteries always carry blood away from the heart, no matter what. Okay, and so when it goes to the lungs, then it comes back through the pulmonary veins, back into the left side of the heart, left atrium, left ventricle, and then it goes out into this thing called the aorta. And this aorta is a very big artery, right? It can be considered artery. It's the biggest artery in our whole body, right? It's about the size of a pipe, about this size, and this connects to both the top, right, which is our head area, our shoulders and our head, and also down all the way to the bottom to our feet. Besides all these blood vessels, there is also the coronary arteries that is connected just at the bottom of the aorta. It actually provides the heart itself with enough blood and oxygen and glucose so that the heart will continue to beat. Okay, so this is a diagram. It's not accurate. It's not the physical, not how it looks like in real life, but it's just a helpful diagram to understand. So let's talk about the 4 chambers of the heart. So deoxygenated blood is carried back from the body to the vena cava, and then eventually the blood is deposited into the right atrium. The word atrium is a word in the past. It used to mean like a place where people gather. Okay, so atrium, right? It's like an open air area in a building where people gather and meet. Okay, so that is kind of the reason why this word is used, atrium. So the right atrium, okay, remember mirror image, so this is the right, this is the left. So this is where the deoxygenated blood will be gathered. Then you contract, right? The right atrium will contract slightly and push the blood down into the right ventricle, right, through this valve known as a tricuspid valve. So the function of this valve is that it prevents the blood from flowing backwards. Blood must only move in one direction, and it cannot be allowed to have this thing called backflow of blood. So these valves, they prevent the backflow of blood. They prevent the blood from going from the right ventricle into the right atrium. It cannot be like that. It must be from the right ventricle towards the pulmonary arteries. Okay, so anyway, the right ventricle will contract. It will push the blood through this valve over here, which is called a semilunar valve, and into the pulmonary arteries, which will then lead towards the lungs. Okay, at the lungs, the blood will be oxygenated. It then is carried back all the way to these pulmonary veins over here, where the blood will then enter into the left atrium. And then from the left atrium, it goes down into the left ventricle. And there is another bicuspid valve that separates the left atrium from the left ventricle. And the word bicuspid, it means two. It looks like there are two folds. Okay, the word cuspid means fold, so there's a two-fold valve. Whereas the word tricuspid means three-fold valve. You need to know the difference between these two, right? So tri is on the right and bi is on the left. Okay, so when the blood goes to the left ventricle is where the left ventricle will push the blood through this semilunar valve and into the aorta, and then subsequently into the arteries. And the left ventricle is a very much thicker and more muscular as compared to the right ventricle. The reason why is because the right ventricle is simply pushing blood towards the lungs, which is quite near to the heart, right? Lungs is just above the heart. Whereas the left ventricle, it needs to pump the blood with such high pressure and such force that it's able to push it into the aorta all the way up to the brain and all the way down to the toes, right? So it needs to have very high pressure over in the left ventricle, and so the walls of the left ventricle are much thicker. Okay, I'll be repeating myself quite a lot in this, right? Because yeah, it's quite repetitive. Okay, so the human heart has 4 chambers, and this figure shows a more detailed diagram of the human heart that has been cut open to show the 4 chambers and the blood vessels. The walls of the chamber are formed by the heart muscles. When the heart muscles contract and relax, they enable the heart to pump blood around the body. The following parts form the heart chambers. There are 2 upper chambers, the right atrium and the right and the left atrium. Okay, so atrium is singular and then atria is plural. The atria receives blood from the veins. Now remember that the word veins simply means that something that carries blood towards the heart. The atria have comparatively thin muscular walls since they only force blood into the ventricles that are directly below them. So there's does not require high pressure. As you can see here, the heart is a bit these diagrams are like overlapping each other, right, underneath and above each other. So you gotta be careful of the way that the blood is flowing. We are talking about this right atrium over here. Alright, there are also the two ventricles. These are the two larger lower chambers, which are the left ventricle and the right ventricle and the left ventricle. Ventricles have comparatively thick muscular walls. The left ventricle muscle is much thicker because it pumps blood around the whole body, and this requires high pressure. The right ventricle has thinner walls than the left ventricle, since it only pumps blood to the lungs, which is close to the heart. There is also this thing known as a median septum. This is a muscular wall that separates the right and left sides of the heart. It runs down the middle of the heart. The median septum prevents the mixing of deoxygenated blood in the right side and oxygenated blood in the left side. Mixing of deoxygenated blood with oxygenated blood will reduce the amount of oxygen carried by the rest of the body. Okay, so let's talk about this septum over here. There is this disease where there's a hole. Alright, so oops, not this one, not nose. Okay, so there's this disease known as septal defect. Right, basically it means that the septum is broken. It can be between the atria or between the ventricles. Okay, so that means the wall is broken somehow. Alright, it's usually a genetic disease. What this means is that the oxygenated blood can flow from the left atria or the left ventricle towards the right side. Okay, and this mixes the oxygenated blood with deoxygenated blood, and this prevents the blood that we receive in our body cells is then going to be lower in oxygen. Okay, and that is going to cause some medical problems down the line. Okay, so this is called septal defects. And so yeah, as you can see here, septal defects will reduce the amount of oxygen carried by the rest of the body. Okay, let's go through one more time of how the blood flows through the heart using this diagram. Okay, so deoxygenated blood carried back through the veins into the vena cava and then into the right atrium. Right atrium contracts, pushes the blood down through this tricuspid valve into the right ventricle. The right ventricle then contracts and then pushes the blood up to this pulmonary artery, then to the lungs, and then the blood is oxygenated, comes back through the pulmonary veins into the left atrium, then through this bicuspid valve down into the left ventricle, and then up again through this semilunar valve. Okay, I forgot to mention there's also the semilunar valve over here also. Okay, so this goes underneath, okay, like a bridge, you know, there's a bridge and there's a underpass thing. So it goes underneath the pulmonary artery, which is this whole area called the aorta. And the aorta then connects to both the upper torso and the lower torso, right? And then to your toes and to your head. And also the aorta is actually connected to the coronary arteries of the heart itself. So there's a small amount of blood that goes down back to the muscles of the heart. Okay, so there's this septum, right? The median septum that's dividing the left side and the right side of the heart. There's this thing called the chordae tendineae, right? These are some like ligament-like structures that help to hold the valves. Okay, but these are not really tested. Anything else that I miss? Nope, got everything. Okay, let's talk about valves. So, the flow of oxygenated and deoxygenated blood through the heart is controlled by the closing and opening of valves found in the heart. As we see, right, on the right side of the heart, there is this thing known as a tricuspid valve. Remember, the word tri means 3, so there are 3 folds over here. And on the left side, right, in between the left atrial and the left ventricle, there's this thing called the bicuspid valve. The bicuspid valve means 2, there are 2 folds over here. Now, all valves always prevent backflow of blood, right, from the chamber to the previous chamber. And we also have these 2 valves over here. They have 2 names. All right, so these valves have 2 names. They are called the aortic valve, which is also known as a semilunar valve in the aorta, and they are called the pulmonary valve, which is also known as the semilunar valve in the pulmonary artery, as we can see over here. For simplicity's sake, we will just call both of these as semilunar valves, but we'll call these semilunar valves as the pulmonary artery semilunar valves, and we'll call this one as the aorta semilunar valves. Okay, so yeah. Okay, I have repeated this whole story I think 6 times already. So just read through one more time. Okay, just read it through one more time by yourself. Really understand, right? Really try to master it. Try and recite it by yourself. Okay, it's gonna be a very long and a little bit difficult to remember, but this is something that we have to do. Okay, so read it, right? Test yourself, see if you can understand the flow of blood through the heart. Okay, let us move on. Okay, so we are talking a bit about this hole in the heart. Okay, so some infants are born with a hole in the heart. The hole may be present in the median septum, separating the left and right atria or the left and right ventricles. Blood will flow through the hole mostly from the left side of the heart to the right side because the pressure on the left side is higher than the right side. This results in the mixing of oxygenated and deoxygenated blood, which causes less oxygen to be transported to the body cells for respiration. Patients with this condition may suffer from shortness of breath and fatigue, and in serious cases, heart failure may occur. However, the majority of patients do not have symptoms and do not require treatment. In more serious cases, medical treatment or surgery may be required. Okay, so this is not that uncommon. Some people have a very tiny hole in their heart, and so the amount of blood that mixes is not that much. It doesn't affect them much, but if the hole gets too big, then it can get serious. Okay, let's talk about this thing known as the cardiac cycle. So a cardiac cycle is the sequence of events that take place in one heartbeat. So, step 1. The atrial muscles contract, forcing blood into the ventricles. Okay, both the atria, they work simultaneously. So when both atria, they will both contract. So after a short pause, the ventricular muscles will contract and causes a rise in pressure inside the ventricle. The rise in pressure causes the bicuspid and tricuspid valve to close and prevent backflow of blood into the atria. This produces a loud "l" sound. The semilunar valves open. Blood flows from the right ventricle and left ventricle into the pulmonary artery and aorta respectively. Okay, so in step 1, right, the blood from both the atria will go down. And step 2, blood from both the ventricles will go up. Step 3, as the ventricular muscles contract, the atrial muscles relax. The right atrium receives blood from the vena cavae, while the left atrium receives blood from the pulmonary veins. Okay, that's what we see over here. Right, the blood's coming here, the blood's coming here. Then step 4, the ventricular muscles then relax. The fall in pressure causes the semilunar valves to close to prevent backflow of blood from the pulmonary artery and aorta into the ventricles. This produces a softer duck sound. The bicuspid and tricuspid valves also open and blood flows from the atria into the ventricle. So step 4, right? this one the valve close, this one the valve open, then blood flow. Then the atrial muscles contract again, and the whole cycle repeats. Okay, so step 5 and step 1 is kind of the same step lah, it's a repeat. Okay, so this cycle can roughly be divided into two words: systole and diastole. Systole occurs when the ventricular or atrial muscles contract. Diastole occurs when the ventricular or atrial muscles relax. Okay, so usually what we say is a ventricular systole or ventricular diastole, or atrial systole and atrial diastole. So a ventricular systole and a ventricular diastole makes up one heartbeat. That means that when both ventricles contract and relax, that is one heartbeat. And in most people, that lasts for about 0.8 seconds. There will be a short pause between the two heartbeats, and the rate of heartbeat varies with age and size of the individual. The average normal heartbeat of an adult is about 72 beats per minute. Note that the atria and the ventricles work alternately. When the atrial muscles contract, the ventricular muscles relax, and vice versa. Okay, so normal heartbeat, right, 72. For some really good athletes, their heartbeat is even lower. Let's search that. Wait. Okay, so rest. Okay, so some athletes have heart rate that's very, very low, maybe like 30 or 40. The reason why they have such low resting heart rate beat is because their heart is stronger, right? Their heart is stronger, so their one pump or one beat can be worth like a normal person's two beats, right? So that's why. Okay, let's talk about this device over here. So some of us, have like smartwatches, and these smartwatches actually contain a device known as an electrocardiogram, and they can measure the heart rate and even heart rhythm. So some watches have been known to even detect heart attack and send a signal to the relatives or to the medical staff when the person is having a heart attack. Okay, these are limited, of course, so we still need to check properly at the hospital. Okay, how does the heart control blood pressure? Blood pressure is the force that blood exerts on the wall of the blood vessels. It is measured in terms of millimeter of mercury. Okay, this is like an old system lah. Okay, but we're still using it right now. So the blood pressure in the arteries is the highest during ventricular systole when blood is forced into the arteries. It decreases during ventricular diastole. So this device has this word: systole, diastole. Systole is when your ventricles are contracting, diastole is when your ventricles are relaxing. A normal high blood pressure would be about 120 for systole and about 75 for diastole. Okay, so if somebody's high blood pressure is 120/80, right, that is considered quite normal. If a person has a blood pressure reading of 140/90, then that likely means that the person has high blood pressure. And another way of saying high blood pressure is also known as hypertension. Okay, so hypertension, the word hyper means too high, tension means pressure. Okay, high blood pressure can occur during exercise or when the person gets angry, but persistent high blood pressure is dangerous. It can lead to other problems like stroke and heart attack. Okay, so I'm gonna pause here, right, because there's a lot of content already. So we'll continue in the next video. See ya. Peace out.